It's the 7th and hopefully final week of our phase 2 roof work. There is still a section that we've still got to put tiles on, and then we've got to make various finishes to some of the tile ends, the tile ridge, and parts of the cornice. After which, we've got to do a lot of tidying up above in order to see the full finished roof for the first time. Something that seemed a long way away when I first saw the roof, with a big hole in the corner, some rotten beams, and hundreds of broken tiles. And on Monday morning, I wasn't sure how much help I was going to be able to give the team that day, as I was still feeling the after effects from my bug last week. But being back on site on a warm sunny morning, it was a pleasure to open up and have the team back and getting set up for work on the final tile section. And after checking the stock of tubes for air and water holes, I was back down to make the final set that was needed. To avoid overdoing things in the first hours, I returned to the shade of my upstairs office for some paperwork. With intermittent check-ins above, up to the mid-morning break. And with the team back on the roof afterwards, I started some preparation for storms and rain forecast for later in the week, with a return to the temporary drain pipes, which we could now attach to the new gutters. Although it was sunny, it was much cooler than last week, and more butterflies were back on the remaining flowers. With Sam and Alu in control of the necessary supplies above, I moved on to some preparations for a meeting later in the week and discussions about future work in front of the house, where some line markers and posts were going to be useful. And for the final progress checks above, it looked like the team would finish the tile laying the next day. And after a day of not overdoing things, I felt like I would be able to help a bit more the next day. With a bit of cloud around on Tuesday, it was a slightly cooler morning, although still definitely shorts and t-shirt weather. And the cooler box was still in demand for the team's drinks. And with more mortar needed for the final tiles, more water was needed in the water deposit for pumping to the bidon at the back. Before getting started with work, I needed to check some papers for a meeting with the Technico. And then I was back above to finish cleaning the end of the cornice that I had started last week. With the brush and chisel, before the mid-morning break. And later using a light acid solution to clear off the smaller mortar pieces left on the surfaces. With the possibility of rain that evening, I thought it would be sensible to clear the gutters to avoid too much material going into the makeshift drain. and then I followed the work while waiting for my meeting with the Technico, which was first delayed and soon postponed, freeing me up for some final rain prep. And then following the last lines of tiles, for which I was keen to see where Miguel and Haggy would stand and how they would line things up. And while I appreciate there has been plenty of tile laying on film, I wanted to follow and share the last of the tile work by the two masters of their craft, which would take right up to leaving time. After one more bucket of mortar needed mixing at the last minute. With the tiles, gutters and drains in place for the first time, I was a bit disappointed that it hardly rained that night. But it was a good deal fresher on Wednesday morning. And after opening up, my day would start with the rescheduled meeting with the Technico. During which the team got started with some of the roof finishes, which would require plenty more mortar from Sam and Alou. Haggy was filling in with mortar all of the end tiles above the gutters. While Miguel was working on the central tile ridge that would bridge the two sides, starting at the connection with the Phase 1 roof work. And with the main tile work now finished, we could get started with clearing away the leftover tile piles, all of which Alou and Sam would be lowering down with the winch. While refilling the water supplies, I gave myself a break from the tile shifting and started some clearing up at the side, where we will soon need some clear space for scaffolding for work on the walls. And having bought a couple of extra drain tubes, I now had enough tubes for a full set of temporary drains, including below the gutter from the Phase 1 work. With the tile end work complete, Haggy moved on to work on the cornice at the side, which would need some normal mortar, some special impermeable paste, and some flat tiles to enable rainwater to drain away from the wall. As we entered the last hour, I was excited to see the full stretch of Phase 2 tiles for the first time. Although there was still a little more clearing required, as both the team and I rushed out at the end of the day. Thursday was another cool morning with the day forecast to get sunnier, then much windier, and for a rainstorm to arrive later in the afternoon. And after rushing out to pick up some materials the day before, the team were ready to continue their work on the finishes. Where on the sidewall above the cornice, Haggy would be repointing the stone joints to minimize the effect of any runoff rain, which required a bit of a pre-check on the color and texture of the mortar Sam was now mixing with some slightly different lime. And with Haggy happy with the mix, he finished chipping out some of the looser old mortar joints, while I started to remove the plastic covers to the aluminium gutters, which the team suggested would be easier while the scaffolding was still up. After the mid-morning break, Miguel was finishing the smoothing of the ridge, and Lou and Sam were lowering down the last of the materials above. Each part of Haggy's repointing work started with a generous dollop along the joints, which he would then smooth and then more precisely indent around the stones, all before more finishing work on it the next day. Having reviewed our scaffolding plans for next week, I agreed to bring forward my stonework on the old integrated drain pipe at the front. So while I would rather have learned about repointing from Haggy, I was now about to learn of the added complexities of stonework at height alone, albeit with the help of Sam making some mortar for me. Haggy had now finished the initial phase of repointing above the cornice, and Miguel was now working on the cornice top, while Haggy started work on a signature finial or dragon's tongue for the tile ridge end, like that from phase 1. And wanting to see this happen, I quickly cleared some of my mortar work, grabbed my lunch and took my viewing seat. With the dragon's tongue in place, I raced back to my wall to use the last of the mortar I had left over, which, after the team had finished, I would need to return to for some final mortar joint tidying. forecast for Thursday evening had been accurate and there had been some very heavy rain. So while opening up, I was keen to check the temporary drains, and it looked like plenty of water had flowed through them. And the next check was on the roof tiles and gutter, which both looked a bit cleaner. Haggy would be off-site for the day, but Miguel would initially be finishing the work on the side cornice, while Sam would start the tidying up at the back, and Alu would be tidying and helping above, including providing some mortar for me, as I look to finish the filling in of the old drain cavity. During the mid-morning break, I had discussed the front wall with Miguel, and we agreed that one group of bricks was too ugly not to be changed. So replacing some of them with stones was my next job. With mortar added to the replacement stones, I headed out for a quick chat with a neighbour, after which I guided Miguel for some final mortar smoothing around some of the tiles.
Liu, saluda, di hola.
With the team having finished their work on the side cornice and the section of wall above it, the roof work is done, and they have now started to take down the scaffolding and are doing some tidying up. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to show the finished roof and talk about a couple of aspects that there might be some questions about. For phase 2 of the roof work, the work has run from this point here until the end, and for the tiles that we've used on top, all of the tiles on the underside facing up are new tiles, and the tiles that are on top and facing down are nearly all old tiles that we have recycled from what was on the old roof before, but we're only using the ones that are in good enough condition that pass the quick tap and sound test that Miguel and Haggy were using. And while all of these old tiles do look very similar, there is a bit of variation. First of all, the colour varies between about 3 or 4 different shades of red and yellow. But also there's a bit of variation in the width and length of the tiles. In particular, the older tiles, which are longer and wider, and which the team have used in certain parts in particular, especially along this ridge here, where they have used the much wider tiles, and also at the end points where they've had 2 layers of tiles, they've used the wider ones for the tile on top. And then another aspect to point out are the series of tiles every 8 or 9 lines that have got a cowl or what looks like a periscope, and those are the air vents, which are used for helping the air to circulate, in particular to help hot air rise up and exit from underneath the tiles. And every line that has these cowls on it ends with these circular tubes that I put in, and then every 4 or 5 lines between the air vents, on the end point we put the little half semicircular tubes in case there is any water under the tiles, so that as it drains down, it has an exit point into the gutter. So there are a couple of interesting aspects to the roof, but more importantly, as a whole, I think it looks absolutely fantastic, and I'm very, very pleased with the work that the team have done on it. Anyway, now I'm going to head down, grab some lunch, and see the guys finishing their tidying up for the day. Having finished my lunch very quickly, and while the team continue with their work on the scaffolding, I thought I would just say a little bit about the impact of the roof work on these indoor spaces, especially the changes to the look and feel. The new beams and brickboards are the most obvious change to the look of the spaces, and they do make everything look that much tidier and safer. But the other change that I'm particularly pleased about are that before we did the work, there were a lot of patches along these walls and in that room where they had just been filled in with old ugly mortar, or even worse, just left with random bricks. And all the work by the team at replacing those sections with stones make all the walls look that much better. And then in terms of the impact on how the spaces feel, the big change, especially last week when it was seriously hot outside, is the impact on the temperature in these spaces. Last week, this whole space was really quite cool, and today when it's quite cool outside, it's a pretty decent warm temperature here. And I obviously knew that was going to happen, but to actually experience it is a very pleasant surprise, and it just goes to show that the brickboards and the tiles, and of course the insulation, are doing a great job. And I kind of regret not measuring the temperature in here beforehand, before the new roof, so that I could really check the difference that the new roof has made. And after the last 2 or 3 weeks of only really working outside and above, I'd almost forgotten just how much work we did in this space at the beginning. First of all, taking all the old materials away, then all the work on the tops of the walls, the endless rubble that we cleared out, and of course the putting up and then taking down of all the scaffolding, which opened this space up to how it's going to be in the future. And on the point of scaffolding, I'm going to go and check how the guys are getting on with the scaffolding outside.
Hoy dice una cosa y mañana dice otra.
And that is the end of work for this week. And although we've got a lot of tidying up to do, the roof work, the first phase of which started back in October, is now done, with some great work done by Miguel, Hagi, Sam, Alu and Fodo. Whether on the tidied up wall tops, the new sturdy beams, the wonderfully flat and level tiles on top, and the nice finishes on the cornices, the gutter and the dragon's tongue. And with one major milestone reached, we will now set our sights on the next one. So please do tune in again next week to see how we get on.